Welcome to UPLEVEL, Real Health, Real Talk with Dr. Jenna Blasi. I'm Dr. Jenna. I spent years crafting ways to help women thrive, and I want to help you do the same. On this podcast, we dive deep into health at every level, focusing on the mind, the body, and the spirit. This is where real conversations meet transformational wellness. We'll be talking about all the things that truly matter, from nutrition and fitness to lifestyle, mindset, and personal development. Plus, the real deal on managing stress and navigating menopause. So if you're ready to elevate your health journey with authentic, transformative insights, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to UPLEVEL. I'm Dr. Jenna, and I changed my mind about what I want to talk about today. So I decided I want to talk about overeating and the different reasons why you might find yourself overeating or even binging. And, typically I map out about a month's worth of podcasts, just making sure that I'm addressing where we might be at seasonally and mixing up the sort of more medical health with some of the mindset anyway. And so this is not what I had planned for today. And all of a sudden it just came to me that I wanted to talk about overeating. So at least one of you needs to hear this. And I think I probably do too. So why do we overeat? Why do we binge? Why do we sabotage? Now, let's start with some emotional reasons, because that's kind of the most obvious, I think, for a lot of us. There's stress, anxiety, overwhelm. Some people, when they're stressed, they stop eating. And other people, when they're stressed, they eat a lot. Right? And I know that the people that eat when they're stressed usually are maybe envious of the people that don't eat when they're stressed, but neither is healthy. All right. But what a lot of us, when we're stressed, when we're anxious, when we're overwhelmed, we're using food to self-soothe. And I know I can do that when my day has been really just go, go, go. Maybe I'm back to back. Maybe I didn't block in as many breaks as I want. When I get done, and this used to happen when I would put my kids to bed at night, but now they don't go to bed earlier. It's like I just wanted to eat. It was a form of relaxation for me. So it's using food as self-soothing. Another big reason is boredom. And so we have to realize, when do you just eat because you're bored? Are you mindlessly watching TV and you just have a habit maybe of eating while you're watching TV or reading a book? I know I used to like to munch on things when I would read a book. So I'd usually grab like a bag of carrots so that it was a healthier choice than a bag of chips. And so I started to equate an enjoyment of eating carrots when reading a book. So we can retrain ourselves. But loneliness, boredom, food fills that space. It fills that space. It can also be a diversion. Like you have to get something done. And maybe you have a big list and it's like, oh, well, I'm hungry, or let me just go around and graze. And so it can also be like a distraction. So boredom, distraction either from your boredom or distraction from something bigger that you're procrastinating on doing. We've talked about procrastination. We've talked about putting things off. My mentor always says, do it now, do it now, do it now. And the truth is, when we want to change, any of you who are goal-oriented, and I really recommend we all have goals, because without goals, we're kind of drifting along. And so goals help us grow, and we're here to grow, in my opinion. We're here, our spiritual DNA is perfect, and it's for expansion. It's for greater life. And so when you have a goal that is going to help you grow, whether it's in exercise, like any goal, we have to get uncomfortable to have change. We can't exercise in our comfort zone and expect our body to change. We can't go about our life just 100% in our comfort zone and expect to change. So those of you that have goals, that have been following me, that created a vision, that created goals, food can be a distraction from doing those uncomfortable things, from doing what we want to do. And then another thing that I've seen frequently is celebration or reward. I deserve this. And that comes from childhood. Like, we have to go back and really look at, why are we equating food as a reward? Did we not get the reward of like love, attention. I know when, I remember when my son was young and maybe he'd be crying and my dad would try to swoop in with a lollipop. And I was like, stop, like, let's not set up a pattern of emotional eating. And that, that's actually different from a reward. So this is what happens when I think off the cuff. Different things come up. So there's the reward. I deserve this. I've been a good boy. I've been a good girl, right? Not a healthy pattern. And there's an inner child in us whose needs have not been met, which is another emotional reason. By the way, sabotage can be that our needs are not met, but also then that emotional, that self-soothing. And that's set up by well-meaning parents, well-meaning grandparents. Oh, are you sad? Let's go get ice cream. That'll cheer you up. Or my son crying and woo, let me come in with a lollipop. And I didn't want to see him. I'm like, I work with so many adults who we have to undo these eating patterns. Let's not develop that with my son, for example. So food is really just food. It's comfort, it's reward, it's escape, sometimes rebellion, and recognizing that it's probably not even a matter of willpower. It's an unmet need that you have for love, for affection, for stimulation, right? Boredom, like for, and then there can be that deeper pattern of sabotage, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Now, cravings can also be for biological reasons. Your blood sugar crashes, that's going to drive cravings. And so I used to be on a pattern of low blood sugar, hypoglycemia, where my blood sugar would crash and then I would reach for sugar. I would reach for the quick fix. And then my blood sugar would go up and then it would crash again and I'd reach for more, which is, even though it was a hypoglycemic physiological state, it's a path towards diabetes because I was having this blood sugar roller coaster ride that I had to work really hard to find the root cause of to undo. Restriction. If you've been restricting for a really long time, then you get in this binge restrict cycle. Binge, then I restrict. And the body's like, I want food. And then you binge. And then you're like, you get to a point, tipping point, where you don't feel good about it, which, by the way, let's stop the shame cycle. Shame is not helping. Compassion will help. So don't beat yourself up. Don't feel shameful. It's actually one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it today, because I have been like pretty balanced with food for a long time. And when I was in high school, I used to restrict and over-exercise, and I was never diagnosed with anything, but I mean, I was very, very restrictive with my food, and I was very much over-exercising. And so that is a pattern of an eating disorder. And it wasn't so deep that I ended up continuing down that rabbit hole. I ended up being an exchange student to France for a year where I wanted to, eat whatever they wanted to feed me. So I gained a rapid amount of weight in a small period of time. But this cycle of restricting and binging is really detrimental on the body. It's really detrimental on our mind, and it can be really detrimental and destructive on our metabolism. So I used to be someone, for example, that if I had one cookie, I might as well eat the whole package, right? If I was going to have a couple of chips, I might as well just eat them all. And I didn't have the balance to just have one. And I worked really hard to get to that place. And what I had to do was actually take processed sugars, take a lot of things out of my diet for a while, balance my gut, do some healing, and then try to reintroduce it in a way where I could actually have moderation. And moderation, for some of us, we should probably recognize that there's certain things that maybe you're just not going to find moderation with. Like alcoholics who go sober, they're not going to drink again because it will re-trigger a pattern. There is no moderation for them. And so you might find, even though I talk about moderation and balance, because I think if we hold the pendulum in one direction, it will swing back. It will swing back to the other direction. But maybe some foods, maybe some things are too much of a trigger and you don't have them in your life. That is really for you to figure out. So it took me years, but it really came from a deep balancing my blood sugar, a deep balancing of my whole body, similar to the way that I work with people in my practice, and then being able to really tune in. I've talked about intuition. My husband used to joke because I would have this desire, let's say after dinner, for a cookie. And my previous pattern was like, I'm going to eat, if I'm going to have a cookie, I might as well have 3, 4, or 5. It was just too good. And so I'd grab a cookie and then I would like force myself to have delayed gratification. And I say force because I wanted the cookie in that moment. But, the marshmallow test, delayed gratification can really help us take back control of our cravings. So I was like, okay, I'm going to let myself have the cookie, but I won't have it for, 5 minutes. Now, this might sound extreme to those of you, or some of you, but I don't want to eat sugar all the time. I don't feel good when I do. So I can talk myself into it in the moment, but then my joints ache more. I don't feel as good. I often don't sleep as well. And when I eat a lot of sugar, like I used to do over the holidays, I would typically get sick because sugar suppresses our immune system. So it was important to me, may not be important to you, it was important to me to have control over these cravings. So I'd have a cookie and it'd be sitting there. My husband used to joke. He said, I think you're like the only person that can like carry a cookie around for 10, 15 minutes and not eat it. So then when I would set a period of time, like I'll let myself eat it in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, typically we've broken at that point that psychological attraction or addiction to that thing. And so then I would actually tune in and I would say, how much do I really want this? Now I like to douse. People that know me, I over douse. If you know what that is, if you don't even worry about it. And then I would say, like, is it in my highest good to eat this cookie? And sometimes, I get a yes, and then I would enjoy the cookie. And other times I get a no, and I go put it back. I'll go put it back. And if I did have it, I enjoy it. Don't walk around the house like eating the bag of chips or eating the cookies, and then you didn't even enjoy it. Didn't even know. Be present with it and enjoy it. So there was a very long period of time where I had that ability to have a little bit of cake or some chips or one cookie, maybe 2, whatever, but not needing to then binge. And one of the exercises that I've given people over the years, and I don't remember if I've ever showed this in my podcast, is when you're having that craving, ask yourself on a scale of 0 to 5, how much do I want this? And it's probably a 4 or 5. And then do something else. Say, okay, I'm going to breathe. Do some deep breathing for 5 breaths, or drop and do 10 push-ups, or you can do push-ups against a door frame if you can't do actual push-ups, or do them on your knees, or do 10 crunches, or just do something. Distract yourself, do something else, get up and move. Then breathe again and ask yourself, how much do I really want this now on a scale of 0 to 5? For most of us, it's gone down. And then you can move on and do something else. And if it hasn't, then you've at least broken that pattern of, was I just stressed? Was I just bored? And be really present and make that choice. So these things, that exercise I just gave you, for example, stopping and breathing, stopping and moving, also is great for our hormones. Because if we're in a stress response, our cortisol is maybe up. And so we're taking the time to bring it down. So when we look at the hormone effect as one of the physiological, biological reasons for overeating, for binging, there's cortisol, there's your leptin ghrelin balance, there's estrogen progesterone shifts. So what I started to allude to earlier was, well, I did allude to it for years, more than alluded to it. I don't even know why I'm using that word right now. It's not the right word for this. So for years, I had that balance. And then when the pandemic hit, I had a lot more time. I was seeing fewer patients. I was spending more time at home. I had more time too because I had been teaching at a lot of gyms and fitness clubs, and they all closed. And so I was really enjoying doing my own workouts at home and being able to do them a little longer and do my own thing and try different challenges for myself. And I was perimenopausal at the time, and I felt really good. And I got fit, and I just felt really balanced. And when menopause actually hit, my appetite control disappeared. It disappeared. And I started to get into a cycle of overeating. And I felt ravenously hungry on a physical level at times, and also on an emotional level. It's like I didn't have the ability, I felt like I didn't have the ability to eat as healthy as I had been. And if I tried to kind of because my family, we have junk stuff, not your standard American diet junk, but Whole Foods, natural grocer style junk food in the house. We do. My husband does the grocery shopping and he buys stuff that I wouldn't buy. And if stuff's on sale, we suddenly have a whole bunch of granola and a whole bunch of this and that. And so that was okay with me because I had that inner place. But after menopause, perimenopause, it wasn't an issue. But after menopause, I don't know if it was the deeper estrogen decline or what it was, but I started wanting the various things that were surrounding me. And I felt kind of out of control. I still do. I haven't completely come out of this. And then I did this fitness program that I really enjoyed. And we were actually tracking. And that was like, we were supposed to, like, we were going into a calorie deficit. If you want to lose fat or you want to release weight, or release fat, I should say, shed fat, you have to actually be in a deficit. Like that's just the way it is. But my body was rebelling. Talk about rebellion. I was like, there was no tolerance for a deficit for me. And I would try to do it for like, I could do it for a few days, stay in that deficit. And then I would spend the next day or two like overcompensating other direction. So I'm sharing this with you because I want you to know that none of us are perfect. You're not alone, but you can break these cycles. And I'm in the process of really deeply breaking that cycle, but not in a restrictive way, because restriction can really backfire, but in a balanced way. And the truth is, when we're balanced, when we're not letting our cravings and our overeating or binging or self-sabotage, when we take the control back from that cycle, it feels really good. I was in a mind trip of justifying the eating. All right. So I was justifying that I decided my diet's been too healthy. It's been too restrictive. And look, maybe it has. And that to really build muscle, because to build muscle, actually, you don't want to be in a deficit. And so I was justifying that I'm just building muscle. I need to eat more calories and build more muscle. But the thing is that's fine. That's true. You can do that in a healthy way, and you can do that in an out of control, bingy way. So I may have been naturally putting myself into muscle building mode. And look, to be fair, my idea of unhealthy eating, it's not Twinkies, right? It's not terrible. But it's not where I feel my best. And my joints were starting to ache more. And my sleep was starting to get disrupted. And my mood was getting disrupted. So that's the part. And then I'd flip and I'd be like, Jenna, this is not just about muscle building. It's about your mood and your sleep and feeling good. And so then I'd kind of tighten it up, and then I would justify and go the other direction. It's vicious. It didn't feel good. So now I've been working really deeply, because I believe in practicing what I teach and growing and being the best version of myself, on really getting underneath that pattern. And that is also meaning addressing my hormones, because there is a factor. That's why, we're talking about the physiological, biological reasons. Estrogen regulates appetite. It has an appetite regulating aspect to it. And it also is tied with our serotonin, which is our feel-good neurotransmitter. And if our serotonin is low, we can feel more anxiety, we can feel more overwhelm, it disrupts our sleep, it affects our mood. So there are biological reasons why I was going through this. And then I was justifying it in my head, so I wasn't really doing anything about it. So I'm going deeper with that personally. But that dysregulation and that the hormones themselves and the patterns that happen due to the hormones also affect our sleep. And when our sleep is adversely affected, this dysregulates our appetite. So again, it's a vicious cycle on a lot of levels that is really, really encourage us to break, get to the bottom. I worked with coaches too, like work with experts who've been there, work with coaches, because we can go into a shame cycle. We can start beating ourselves up that it's a lack of willpower. It's not necessarily a lack of willpower. If my estrogen plummets and then my hormones are disrupted, that is not just about willpower, right? It's a signal. And so awareness, just like in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Awareness is the first step to change. And as I said earlier, overeating can be from unmet needs. It can be from these physiological changes, and it can be from the biology of our body rebelling. Like, for example, if you've been in a restrictive phase, there's the mental emotional piece. There's also the low energy availability. LEA, low energy availability. If you've been under fueling, your metabolism's going to slow down. You're tired. It's going to affect your mood. That's not healthy. And so we don't want you to go to the other extreme and binge. We want to give your body the fuel that it wants, that is required for it to function optimally. So the cravings are not the enemy. They're not. They're a message. They're an indication. So many of the patients that I work with, they come in to our programs with sugar cravings and various cravings. And some of them, they might get a little escalated, but for most people, they actually get better. And actually, for most people, they get better, but even like right away. But for some people, they might escalate initially because there's that like fear, there's that mental emotional piece like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? We fight change. The old paradigm fights the change. But remember, no change happens in your comfort zone. And most of us, our subconscious doesn't want us to be uncomfortable. That's what the self-saboteur is. It's taking us back into our comfort zone. But if you really want change, if you really want to change your body, change your mind, change your life, you have to break that pattern and not give the power. It's like a spoiled child having a tantrum. That's what our subconscious does. No. We can't give it the candy. We have to say no to that self-saboteur. And so, because the self-saboteur is just trying to protect us. It's just trying to protect us, keep us in the familiar, right? The terror barrier, run back to what's familiar because that's safe. So even those that have those escalating cravings in the beginning, because they're fighting that piece, they get better. They get better. So every time you say, I blew it, this is just how it is, I don't have any willpower, this is just how it's going to be, you're actually giving power back to that old pattern. Don't do that. Let's take power back. Let's take power back for ourselves. So looking at like mindset and mental framing around this, I've talked about that all or nothing thinking. Well, I blew it, so I might as well just keep going, right? I had the cookie, might as well have the whole package. Perfectionism puts this pressure that leads to rebellion. If we expect our kids to be perfect, we put all this pressure, they're going to rebel. You know, I don't want my kids to eat a lot of sugar. I think I've told this story before. I don't want my kids, but I want them to make those choices to some extent so that they are good at decision making. And it's not just like this iron fist, is that what it's called? Like, you can't have sugar. And then they're going to rebel against that. That's why I tell that story of my son when he was about 6. And but at a younger age, yes, I'm controlling how much sugar goes into their diet best I can. And he came up and he was like, can I have 2 more cookies, Mom? And I said, what do you think? And he had this funny look on his face. And he said, like, because I'd never asked him that before. And I said, I think, it's time for you to start feeling what sugar feels like in your body. And what do you think? And so he said, He said, well, maybe I'll just have 1 more. And so he started learning self-regulation and making those healthy choices himself. So, and then remember from that mindset piece that self-criticism and shame is fueling the cycle, because the worse you feel about yourself, when we don't feel good about ourselves, we're not going to make healthy choices. The worse you feel about yourself, the poorer choices, the less healthy choices. So like, let's not criticize, let's observe, but let's be neutral. Let's not shame ourselves. That is going to fuel the cycle. And then be aware of your environment. Right? There's environmental triggers, like I talked about at my house, and hyper palatable foods. Any of you that are still eating fast food out there, they're engineered to override our fullness, and they're engineered for us to want more. They have like the exact ratio, and they've studied this, of sugar and fat and salt, that you're like, you want more, which is why it's hard to just have a couple French fries. They're engineered for us to want more. And so in these social settings, sometimes we feel peer pressure. You don't want to be the one that's not partaking. Why do we care? Why do we care? I haven't had alcohol since 1998. That was a spiritual choice, like on my spiritual path. Alcohol was just counter to the type of meditation, the type of spiritual path that I was embarking on. And people don't get it sometimes when I'm out, but most of the time they don't care. So when you look at people that are like peer pressuring you, or you peer pressuring yourself, are you assuming they care, right? I remember I did a strategy call, like a free I think it was Discovery Call or something it might have even been one of my program member evaluations. I don't remember, with a woman who was really not feeling well. She was very inflamed. And she said very early on, like first 5 minutes of our conversation, she said, I'm pretty sure that alcohol makes everything worse. Like if I have alcohol, she had all these symptoms. And in our journey with people, there's at least a period of time where if you're a drinker, you stop, because we want to reset stuff for a period of time. And so, and then we educate around alcohol, and you get to choose, right? You get to choose what you want in your life. And so, but she said, I'm not willing to give up alcohol. I said, you just told me that it's causing like all these symptoms. She said, yeah, but I go out socially. Like, what would I do? I said, have some club soda. Like, no one's even going to know. Have a sparkling water, put your lime in it. Like, what? Anyway. And I said, well, are you willing to even give it up for a period of time? And, but by the way, as an aside, I don't believe this woman was actually an alcoholic. That's a different conversation. I think just socially, she'd go out and she wanted to have a drink, with friends. I could be wrong, but anyway. And she said, no, because, what would my friends think? And how can I, go out with them on a Friday night? So that was the end of the conversation. I was like, I can't help you. Like, if it makes you worse, and this is even before like all of the information that we have on alcohol now on its detrimental effects. This was back when people still said, moderation is healthier. That's what I was told. Moderation with alcohol is healthier than abstinence, which we now know is not true. But regardless, I said, I can't help you. It just didn't make sense. So where are you letting the peer pressure? Where are you letting the social setting override your health? Because that will catch up. These choices we make, especially when we're really aware of them, and a lot of us aren't even aware, it will catch up. I've met with 50-year-olds who were exercising, eating, quote unquote, fairly healthy, who've already had strokes, who've already had heart attacks. It's really heartbreaking. When is enough enough? And we want to thrive. My cousin, he once was like, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't eat meat. Like, what fun are you? What good is your life? No, I don't think he said what good is your life, but something to that effect. And I love him dearly. But I said, I love the way I feel. I love my life. I love the clarity in my brain and the energy in my body. I don't miss those things. So really choose, like, how do you want to feel? I want to show up as the best mom for my kids. If I were drinking and smoking and not eating well, at my age, they wouldn't have their best mom. I wouldn't be able to do the things that I do with them. So it's a choice. And then easy access and portion sizes, especially so look at your environment. What can you do to maybe make little shifts in your environment? What can you do when you go out to eat to not be starving, to address the enormous portion sizes that most restaurants will give us? And just be aware of those environmental triggers, because we can't control all of them. I'd like my husband to buy less, shop the perimeter more, and we're working on that. But sometimes some of those environmental triggers are going to be there. And then I just want to finish with two more: the subconscious, the deep drivers. Right? We talked about this. There can be an identity conflict. And what I was going to talk about initially today in the podcast was self-image. Such an important topic. So this is going to tie in. You might have an identity conflict. Part of me doesn't believe that I deserve to change. Well, I'm the quote unquote fat one. So when you start getting on a healthy path, that self-saboteur, that identity comes in and says, this isn't me. And so an identity conflict, we have to rewire it through repetition. We have to retrain the brain. And that's self-image. I'm going to talk about that next time. There could also be fear of success or failure. And that can also be a self-image issue. Successful people are X. Maybe you don't have a good idea in your head about what success means. Or again, an identity of I'm a failure. So it could be fear of success or failure, an identity with success or failure. So we have to work on those pieces. And then there's comfort in old habits. I said this a few times. There's comfort in old habits. There's safety in the familiar. And that can lead right into self-sabotage if we don't actively have awareness and choose not to give in. Don't run back to safety. Someone's trying to quit smoking. They have to change their identity around I'm a smoker. And when they have that desire, that's what's safe. The subconscious is like, hey, in that moment, when you're having that cigarette, everything feels more relaxed. That's safer. But in the longer term, it's not safer. So we have to fight that to have the change. So look at your self-sabotage patterns. Are you using food as a distraction from deeper issues? Is there an identity piece? Are you punishing yourself? Or, well, I was bad anyway, so let me just go fully down that path. I don't like these terms of good and bad. They're so judgmental. And you might, be testing the boundaries, or so you might test the boundaries. Like, am I really gonna do it this time? And then you give in to this idea that you aren't. Or you can test the boundaries, and sometimes the universe and God and spirit test our resolve. How bad do you want it? How committed are you to how you want to feel, how you want to live? Because remember, the goal is not perfection. Have some compassion for yourself. Be aware of the whys. Be aware of the whys that you're doing it, and be aware of your why. For why did you want to get on a healthier path? Why do you want to be more balanced? And really understand that you can choose your best life. You get to choose. In fact, my bracelet today has a little thing that says, I choose joy. I get to choose. I get to choose if I'm going to let the outside come in and hold me down, so to speak, or if I am going to just keep self-correcting. Remember, the rocket failed its way to the moon. So we slip, we self-correct. We slip, we self-correct. So you've got this. Get the right people in your corner, which is part of your environment, both the people, the friends, the relationships that you have, as well as working with the right folks, and go easy on yourself, have compassion. And I hope you found this really helpful and just what you needed to hear today, because it just sort of came through that this is what I was drawn to talk about. So thank you all so much for joining me. And next time we're going to get into self-image. We cannot outperform. Here's a little teaser. We cannot outperform our self-image. And so if these sabotaging, overeating, binging roller coaster that you've always been on has become part of your image, we got to create a new image. Create a new image, and that is a game changer. So we're going to talk about that next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Thank you for joining me on this episode of UPLEVEL, Real Health, Real Talk. I hope today's conversation inspired you to take the next step in your health journey, one that nourishes not just your body, but your mind and spirit as well. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's episode, please leave a review. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep thriving. And remember, true wellness is a journey, and you are on the right path.